Hey everyone, Leander here, and today we are going to learn how to do some basic JavaScript. So this tutorial is for complete beginners in JavaScript. However, it does require some basic knowledge of HTML and CSS. If you need that, you can check out my previous tutorials on those topics. Before we dive in, let's try to get a better idea of what JavaScript is by comparing it to HTML and CSS. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all play distinct roles in a web page, application, or game. HTML is like the skeleton of a web document. It gives the document its basic structure, saying what information goes where. So here's a web page that uses just HTML, and here's the code. Meanwhile, CSS gives a web page its style, its physical appearance. So if HTML is like the skeleton of a page, CSS is like the musculature, the skin, maybe even the clothing of that web page. And so here's a page that uses CSS. The code is over here, and here is the CSS part of that code. So if HTML is like the skeleton of a web page, and CSS is like the muscles, skin, and clothing, then what is JavaScript? Well, JavaScript is like the brain or nervous system of a web page. It's what allows a page to become interactive with the user. Now, to a certain extent, CSS can also allow some interactivity with the user. For example, the hover effect. When I hover over this link here, we see that the appearance of the link changes. However, JavaScript is much, much more powerful. I'd like to quickly give you an example to show you what I mean. By adding some JavaScript to this web page, I'm going to add this code very, very quickly, so don't worry about following along. It's just to show you the power of JavaScript. Now, to make this effect look good, I'm going to alter our banner image a little bit. By adding this bit of JavaScript and changing my banner image slightly, I can now click on this mountain and it moves. There you have it, folks. JavaScript is so powerful, it can move mountains. But seriously, you can really do a lot of amazing things with JavaScript. You can make games, applications, you can even make neural networks and artificial intelligence using JavaScript. But let's start with the basics. First, I'm going to take this page back to the way it was before I added the JavaScript. And then we're going to delete all of the inner HTML and CSS from our page. I'll leave the style tags, but let's get rid of all the rest of the inner HTML in the body here. And let's also change the title. We'll call this page JS for JavaScript. Save that. Now we have a nice blank HTML document to work with. Now we're ready to start coding in JavaScript. Like CSS, JavaScript used to be put in the head of the document, but nowadays a lot of people put it down at the bottom of the body. Also like CSS, we use tags to tell the browser where the JavaScript starts and where it ends. But instead of the style tag, we use the script tag, like this. Let's dive right in with a very simple JavaScript method called alert. So we just type alert, and then we put these parentheses, empty parentheses after that, and we finish the line with semicolons. So just like with CSS, we usually finish lines of CSS code with semicolons. It's the same in JavaScript. It just tells the browser this line of code is finished. So don't forget the semicolons. All right, Let's save that. And when we refresh our browser, it gives us an alert. And the alert doesn't tell us anything, but we can change that by adding something between these parentheses here. So maybe I'll add a number. I'll add 1000. And now the page tells us 1000. There's another way to do this. Instead of directly typing in the number here in the parentheses, we can create a variable. I'm going to create a variable called message. To do that, I'm going to write var for variable, and now the name of the variable, and that could be anything. It could be, x or y, but this is going to be our message variable, so I'm going to call it message. And then we set that equal to something. And I'm just going to grab this 1000 here and paste it right there. So message is equal to 1000. Of course, I end that with semicolons. And then inside of these parentheses, I can just type message. And this will give me the same thing, 1000. But this seems like more work, doesn't it? Creating a variable and then putting the variable inside the alert. Wouldn't it be easier to just type 1000 in here? It might be easier, but by creating a variable, we can, for example, make changes to that variable. And so depending on what the user does, we could maybe add to that or subtract from it. I'll show you what I mean. For example, after our first alert here, we can do something like this. Message equals message plus 999. And then we can do another alert. Same thing, message. And now, if we refresh our browser, we get the original 1000 message, but then we get the message with the 999 added on, so 1999. So variables can be very helpful like this. So far, we've been using alerts to tell us what's going on in our code. But alerts are really annoying. So there's actually a much better way to give ourselves information about what's happening in our programs. And that is to log to the console. And you'll see what I mean in a second. Here's how we code this. We type console.log. And now, when we refresh our browser, we don't get any alerts, but also we can't really see our messages. So where are our messages? Well, our messages are in the console of the browser. Where's the console of the browser, you ask? Well, if you're using a PC, all you have to do is hit F12 on your keyboard and the console's right here, along with some other things like elements and sources, but just click on console and you'll see it. And here we see our messages. Now, if F12 is not working for you, or if you don't have an F12 on your keyboard, there's another way to get the console. And that is you go here in Chrome and go down to More Tools and Developer Tools. And you get the same thing. And so the console is very nice because we can find out things about our programs without bothering the user. The console not only shows our messages, but even tells us which lines of code those messages came from. So it says right here, line 24, in the file index.html. So if we look there in that file, line 24, here it is. In fact, we can just click here and it'll show us that line of code. So the console is very handy. So far, we've just been using a number for our message. I'd like to change that. How about some text? How about hello? Let's try that. Uh-oh, we're getting an error here. It says uncaught reference error. Hello is not defined. And we can click here and actually see where in the code things are happening. And yes, it looks like it's having a problem with hello. You can see that over here. So what does it mean when it's saying hello is not defined? Well, it means that the browser thinks that hello is a variable, but it can't find any var hello equals something something up above, so it's confused. It doesn't know what hello is. It doesn't realize that hello is actually text. So we need to make a change here to tell the browser hello is not a variable. Hello is some text. How do we do that? Well, it's very simple. We just add quotation marks. And I'm using double quotation marks here, but you can use single quotations as well. Let's try that. All right. Now it tells us hello, and then it goes ahead and adds on 999. So we have hello 999 below that. This is kind of weird. So instead of adding 999 onto hello, why don't we create a new variable called name, and we'll set it equal to, how about everyone? And then instead of 999 here, let's add name. And we'll see what this looks like. It should tell us hello, and then it should say hello everyone. Okay, it tells us hello, and then hello everyone. We need a space there, don't we? So let's go ahead and add in a space between hello and everyone, between our message and our name. And to do that, we just do quotations and put a space in between. And plus on either side. There we go. Hello everyone. And why not add some punctuation? How about an exclamation mark? Let's try that. All right. Hello everyone. And I guess we really don't need this first message here, so I'm going to take that off. So we're saying hello to everyone, but unfortunately most people will never see our message because it's in the console, and most people don't even know about the console. So how do we get this message onto our web page? Not in an alert, which is annoying, but actually on the page. Let me show you one way. But first, I'm going to make a little more space here by moving my console toward the bottom of the page like this. I'm going to keep the console open though, because if there's an error in my code, it will say so in the console. So it's really helpful to keep it open. Okay, I'm going to show you a very simple way to put our message onto the page. I'm going to delete console log message, and instead I'm going to type document.body.inner.html and make sure that the HTML part is all uppercase. And then I'm going to set that equal to message. And now if I refresh the page, we get hello everyone in the body of the page. Let me walk you through what the browser did to put our greeting on the page. So it was reading our script, and it got down to this part, which tells the browser, go into the document, and the document is all of our code here, starting with doc type, and go into the body of the document, which of course is this part. And then take the inner HTML, the HTML inside the body, meaning all this stuff, and set it equal to message. So we can actually see what that looks like by going over to the page, hovering over our greeting here, and right-click and go to Inspect. This shows us the inside of our page, and we have the head, and here's our title.js, and here's the body. And it says, hello everyone, and nothing else. Everything else is gone because we've set the inner HTML of the body equal to hello everyone. So everything is gone, including our code, which is not very good. So let's try a different way of putting our message on the page. First, we'll go up here in the body and we'll create a div. And we'll give it an ID. How about message? And we'll close it. And now, instead of body here, we're going to type get element by ID, parentheses, and inside those parentheses, we're going to put the ID of the element that we want to put the message inside of. And the ID is also called message. So we type message in here. And make sure that get element by ID, make sure that the E in element and B in by and the I in ID, make sure that they're capitalized. Okay, save that. And now, when we refresh the browser, it looks the same. Hello everyone. But we can see here inside of the page that we have our hello everyone message and it's inside of the div with the ID message. And we still have everything else, including our code. Before going on, I'm going to go back to our console here and make our text editor a bit wider. And also, I want our text to be a bit bigger on the page, so I'm going to add some CSS. Yeah, that looks better. All right, what if we don't want the user to see this message yet? What if we want the message to appear after the user clicks a button? Well, first we need a button, and we'll make it say show message. And the font size for our button is a little small, so I want to make it bigger. Here's how we can do that. Add a comma and just add button on here in our CSS. That's better. And of course, nothing happens when we click the button yet. To make something happen, we have to create a function. A function is also a kind of variable. So to start off, we do var, and our function's name will be show message with this underscore here. And we set it equal to function, empty parentheses, and then these curly brackets, just like with our CSS. Put some space in there, and then we're going to take all this stuff that we've typed so far, all this JavaScript, and paste it into our function. And now, when we click on the button, still nothing happens because we need to add one more thing. We need to connect this function, show message, to our button. And here's how we do that. We go up to our button HTML and we add onClick equals double quotations, and in those double quotations we type the name of our function, show message, and then these empty parentheses. Don't forget the parentheses or it won't work. Save that, and now when we click on the button, it shows our message. Before going on, maybe I'll add some padding to the body as well. Just to the body, not to the button. Okay, so far when we push the button, it says hello everyone. But wouldn't it be better if we could actually say hello to the specific person using our application? To do that though, we need to first have them tell us their name. So we need to create an input for them to type their name into. So here's how we can do that. We'll make a div here, another div. And inside of that, we'll type name. And after that, we'll add input. And we'll give that input an ID. How about name? Let's see what this looks like. I want to make the font size for inside the input a little bigger. Okay, that's nice. Now, we need to change our show message function so that it grabs the value of this input, which is whatever we type into it, and make the name variable equal to that value. So here's how we do that. Right here, we set name equal to document.getElementById again, and the element we want to get is this one, and the ID for that is name, so name. And we don't want the inner HTML, we want the value, so dot value. And that will give us whatever somebody typed in the box. And it will set name equal to that. So let's try this out. So I'll type my name, Leander. And now it says, hello, Leander. Let's try something else. First though, I'm going to add a horizontal rule to our page, HR. And here's what a horizontal rule looks like. It's just a line that goes across the page. And we're going to use those to separate each of the little applications that we make. I'm going to give our horizontal rule a little bit bigger margins on the top and bottom first. Now let's add a new div. And inside we'll put two inputs. And the first one's going to have an ID of number. And the second one will be called other number. And we'll put a plus between those and an equals afterwards. After the equals, we'll add span. And we'll give this span an ID, and we'll call it sum, as in sum of the two numbers. So far, we have this. Wow, these inputs are really wide. I'd like to make them a little less wide. So why don't we give these two IDs a class? How about we call the class number? Down in our CSS, we'll add the number class, and we'll give those a width of 40 pixels. There, that looks better. So you can see what I'm going to try to do here. We need a button too. We're going to try to add two numbers together. Add numbers. There we go. And of course, right now, if I click on this button, nothing happens. So we need to create a function that will allow us to add numbers that people type in these inputs. So let's go down into our JavaScript and create a new function. Var add numbers equals function, parentheses, curly brackets, and let's see. Well, we need two variables to begin with. Let's call the first one number, var number, and the next one will be var other number. And we need to set these equal to whatever somebody types in these inputs. So we know how to get the value of an input. We did that with our name input here. So we just do the same thing. In fact, we can just take this code here, we can just copy that and paste it. And instead of name, of course, the ID for that input was number. So we put number in there. And then we do the same thing for other number. And we just change the ID to other number. So we got our number, we got our other number. Now all we need to do is just add those together. We know how to do that. We can just say number equals number plus other number. Or we can create a new variable and we can call it sum. Var sum equals number plus other number. And then finally we need to output the sum, and we want to output it into this span here with the ID sum. So we know how to do that because we did the same sort of thing with our message here. So in fact, we can just copy this line of code here, come down here, and instead of message, it's sum, and we want to make the inner HTML equal to our sum variable. Now when we click add numbers, oh wait, I have to put some numbers in here. How about 13 plus 24? When we click add numbers, oh, nothing happens because we forgot to make this button call our function when we click on it. So just like with our message, show message button, we're going to add onClick, set it equal to add numbers, and don't forget the empty parentheses. Uh-oh, big problem. 13 plus 24 does not equal 1,324. To find out what's going wrong, let's try something in the console. I'm going to create a variable, call it A. We'll set it equal to 10. And we can log this variable to the console like this. And when we refresh, here it is. Here's variable A. It's 10. We can also find out what type of variable A is by doing this. Console log the same thing, but instead of just A, we have type of before it. And type of should be all one word. And now it tells us A, and then it tells us what type of variable A is. And of course, A is a number. Well, what if we set A equal to some text, like pizza? Well, what type of variable is this? All right, so it tells us pizza, and it tells us the type of variable, and it says this is a string variable. So when we code, we don't usually talk about a text variable as text. We call it a string. So right now, A is a string variable. Now, I can make another variable, B. I'll set it equal to is good. Like that. Then I can say A equals A plus B. And now, oops, gotta add a space here. Now, pizza is good. And it's a string. So this is how JavaScript adds strings. It just sticks them together. So what could be happening with our numbers when we do this in our adding application? Well, one final hint. Of course, if we go like this, var A is equal to 10 and var B is equal to 5, we get 15. And the variable is a number. But what if we do this? 10 in quotations, 5 in quotations. Oh, we get 105 because A and B are no longer number variables. They are strings. And added together, they make a big long string. So the problem with our adding application is the browser thinks that the values in the inputs are not numbers, but strings. And so it's treating them like strings. It just sticks them together. 13, the string 13 plus the string 24, and that equals 1324. So how can we solve this problem? How can we tell the browser, hey, 13 is a number, it's not a string? Well, check this out. A equals parse int A, and B equals parse int B. Now we get 15, and the type of variable we're dealing with is again a number. So parse int is a method that tries to take a number that's been recorded as a string and convert it back into a number. So let's use this to try to fix our adding application. Before adding number and other number, we'll do number equals parse int number, and other number equals parse int other number. Let's give that a shot. 13 plus 24 equals 37. But we still might have a problem. Watch this. Instead of 13, how about 1.5 plus 2.3? 3? That's not right. Let's find out what's happening. First, I'm going to go up here where we were experimenting with types of variables, and I'm going to delete that. And now, down here, I'm going to console log the number, our number variable, after we use parse integer on it. Let's see what it tells us. Look at that. When it does parse integer on 1.5, it just takes the number before the period, before the decimal. It doesn't pay attention to the part after. So it's doing this basically. It's doing that and it's doing that. So that's why we get 3. Why is it doing this? Well, because it is only for integers. And integers are numbers that don't have a decimal part. They're whole numbers. So if we want to allow decimals, we need to actually use a different method. We need to use something called parse float. So let's change it to parse float for both of these. And we'll try again. There we go. It treats 1.5 as the number 1.5, and we get the proper sum, 3.8. Okay, our problem is fixed, so I'm going to delete this console log part. And now we can move on to something kind of fun. Let's add another div, and in that we'll type color and input, give that the ID color, and we'll add a button, and we'll have it say change color. So it looks like this. Maybe I'll make the input a little less wide here. That's better. Okay, let's make a function that will change the background color of the page. So var change color equals function. And first we have to get the value of the color input. So we'll create a variable, we'll call it color, and we'll set it equal to document.getElement by ID color.value. And now it's really simple to change the background color of the body. All we have to do is type document.body.style.background color and set that equal to our color variable. Oh, of course, we also have to go up to our change color button and add on the change color function. All right, let's give this a try. So, how about red? Voila, it's red. Let's try a different color. Let's try the hexadecimal system. How about this color, whatever it is? All right, cool. Next, how about we add a button that will play a sound effect when we push it? And the sound effect that I want to play will be that drum rim shot that you heard earlier on when I was talking about how JavaScript can move mountains. So we'll say play rim shot for our button here. And now let's go make our function. We'll call our function play rimshot. And outside of our function, we're going to put our sound effect variable. And we'll call it rimshot. And we'll set it equal to new audio. And in parentheses, we're going to put the name of the file. So first I have to go find that file. Here it is. And I'll copy that and paste it into our site folder where our index page is. And I need to get the name of that file. I'm just going to copy that and we'll paste it in here. Save it. And now inside of the function, we just type rimshot.play and parentheses. And that's it. Oh, of course, we have to go back up to our button and we have to add this function to it. Okay, let's try that. There it is. All right, next, why don't we add a button that will play a song, not just a sound effect. So, let's put a break in here, and we'll add another button here. Let's say play song. And actually, the code is going to be basically the same as for our sound effects. So I can just copy all this and paste it, and then just change the names of things. So instead of rimshot, it's going to be called song. And down here, play song. And song here. And the name of the file is of course different, and I have to go get the file. Here is the song I'd like to play, and I'm going to paste it into our site folder and get the title here, the name of the file, and we'll paste that in right here. It would also be nice if we could pause the song when we want it to stop playing. So why don't we add another button right now to pause the song. And we'll make a function to pause the song. And then all we do is just song.pause, parentheses, and that should pause it. Oh, we have to add the functions to the buttons. All right, let's see if this works. Play song. Pause song. Let's make one last set of functions. And for these new functions, we're going to need an image. So I've created an image here called hero, and I'm just going to paste it into our site folder. There he is. Also, I'm going to grab this wall image. We're going to use that too. Okay, I'm just going to throw that image on right now, the image of our hero. And we'll give it an ID too. Let's see how that looks. Okay, there he is. So let's make a button now that will make our hero disappear when we click it. Maybe I'll put our image inside of a div. Let's call our button hide. And now we go down here and create our function. We'll call it, how about hide hero? Outside of the function, we'll create our hero variable. So var hero equals, and we're going to set this equal to our hero image. We do that the same way that we, for example, got the value of number here, except we don't put anything after the get element by ID part. And now this hero variable is equal to this entire thing, this whole image. And now inside the function, we are going to type hero.style.display equals none. And now, here's our button. When we click the button, nothing happens because, once again, we've forgotten to add our function into the button here. So, let's try that again. He's gone. Let's see if we can bring our hero back. I'm just going to copy this button, paste it, and we'll make a new function called showHero. And we'll call this show, and why don't we add hero too? And we'll add hero here as well. So now it looks like this. It doesn't work yet. We even get a nice error here saying show hero is not defined. So let's go down and create it, define it. And to show our hero, all we have to do is set the display property to quotations with nothing between them. And now we can hide our hero and we can show him again, but it's a little bit annoying because when we hide the hero, the page shrinks. We can prevent that from happening by giving this div that the hero is inside of, giving that a set height. So let's first give this div an ID, and we'll call it hero container. So now in our CSS, we put hero container, and we'll set the height to 800 pixels. Let's see what happens when we click hide hero now. Okay, now the page doesn't shrink because the div hero container still remains 800 pixels high. There's one more thing that I'd like to try with our hero image But before that, I need to add on that wall image we saw earlier. So I'm just going to add the wall image. And I'll give that an ID too, just in case. We'll call it wall. Whoa. Wall's actually a little too big. So let's make the wall 600 pixels high. About 500 pixels. Okay, so here we have our hero, and here's this big wall. What I'd like to try to do is have our hero disappear from this side of the wall and reappear over here on the other side of the wall. So, in other words, I want to try to make our hero teleport through the wall. So, I'm going to add a button up here, and we'll call it teleport hero. And I'll just make that function right away. And we'll go down here and we'll create our teleport hero function. Alright, there are a lot of different ways we can move things around on a page using JavaScript. One way is to adjust the margins of the image. For example, we just do hero.style.margin_left. And notice, by the way, that we're adjusting the style of hero, and this style is basically CSS. Notice here we have style tags, but regular CSS is going to have a hyphen here, and then L for left. JavaScript can't handle hyphens like this because it thinks that a hyphen is a minus sign. So that's why margin left looks like this in JavaScript. But basically, a lot of stuff in CSS is essentially the same in JavaScript, except for when you have hyphens, you just take the hyphen out and make the first letter of the second word capitalized. Anyway, let's go ahead and set that to 300 pixels. Oh, we better put that in quotations. So now we have teleport hero, our button here, and when I click it, whoa! He teleported, but somehow the wall also teleported. It went down here. Let me try to expand the page and see what's going on. So when I hit the teleport hero button, it moves the hero, but it also pushes the wall over too. And this is because the position of the wall is relative to the position of the hero right now. So if the hero gets moved, then the wall moves too. So what should we do? We want to get the hero on the other side of this wall. Well, for this, we need to use absolute positioning. So let's go up here into our CSS, and we'll make some space for the CSS of our hero, and we'll give our hero an absolute position. And let's also give our wall an absolute position. Now when we refresh, we see that the wall and our hero are kind of scrunched all the way over to the side here, and that's because now their position is no longer relative to anything. So the browser just puts them over here on the left side. So we actually have to explicitly tell the browser where these things are now. Let's move the wall first. And let's bring the hero down here. And oh, I should explain that what we did here when we did left 300 pixels is we told the browser, put this wall 300 pixels from the left side of the screen. And now we're going to put our hero, not sure how many pixels from the top here. Let's try 1,000 pixels. That's a little too far. Let's make it 900 pixels. Let's see how that works. That's pretty good. There, that's just about right. Now what happens when we press teleport? He almost got through. Let's change the number a little bit. let's make it 320 pixels. 360 pixels. Yay, he got through. So this is one way we can move him. When we're doing this, we're saying make the margin between our hero and the left side 360 pixels. However, this way of doing things is actually probably not the best. A better way to do it is to actually adjust the left position. What's the left position? Well, the left position is what we added here in CSS for the wall. And we didn't add a left position over here for our hero. But we can add it using JavaScript down here. So let's give that a try. And it's the same thing except for we need to actually move him out a little bit further from the left side of the screen. How about 400 pixels? Alright, we successfully teleported our hero through the wall. Before finishing up today, I'd like to talk to you about one thing, and that is why we decided to put the hero variable out here, and also the song variable and the sound effect variable. Why don't we put these inside of the functions? Well, one of the reasons why we kept them outside of the function is because these variables are basically taking something that uses a lot of memory, like a sound, and when we define the variable, it's loading that information into this variable. If we put it outside the function, the browser will create this variable once. It'll take all this information in the song, it'll put it in this variable. It'll do that once. However, if we decide to put it inside, and I'll just do that right now, well, if I refresh it and go up here and I play the rim shot, it still works. But what we don't see is that the browser is loading this sound effect over and over again. Every time we press this button, it's recreating this variable. It's redefining it. And that's actually using up memory. So to avoid that, we just create it once. And that's why we put it outside the function. So when it's outside the function, when we first open the page, the browser comes and reads through all this code, and it'll get down here and it'll say, oh, okay, rimshot is equal to this audio. I got it. And from then on, rimshot will always be this audio. There's no need to reload it again and again. So that's why it's outside of the function. On the other hand, when we have an input, for example, for add numbers, and we put some numbers in there, and we want to add the numbers, this number input, we get the value from that, and we make number equal to that, and we want this inside the function, or it won't give us any new number that somebody types in. So let me show you what I mean. If I take this number variable definition here, and I cut that out, and I paste it outside of the add numbers function, watch what happens. 12 plus 34 equals NaN. What does NaN mean? NaN means not a number. What's the problem? Well, to find out what the problem is, we can go here and let's console log number. And we'll open up our console log again, F12, so we can see what's going on. Add numbers. Look at that. It logged nothing. Why did it log nothing? Because when the browser reads through the first time, it tries to find the value for the number input, but it's doing this before anybody ever presses this button or types anything in, and it only does it once. It doesn't do it when this function is called. So that's why it gets nothing for the value. And then it tries to add nothing to 34. And when you try to parse float nothing, this is what happens. You get not a number, NaN. So that's why we assigned the number variable inside of the add numbers function. So I'm just going to put it back. In JavaScript, variables like number here, which are defined inside of a function, are called local variables, and they can only be used inside of the function where they're defined. On the other hand, we have variables like rimshot here, which are defined outside of any function. These variables are called global variables, and they're global because they can be used by any function. And as you've seen, sometimes we'll want to use global variables, and sometimes we'll want to use local variables. Alright, that's it. This was just a basic tutorial, but still we were able to do a lot of things. We were able to make a personalized message. We were able to add some numbers. We were able to change the color. We were able to play a sound effect and a song. We were able to hide our hero, show our hero, and teleport him through a wall. Stay tuned for my next video where I'll show you more cool stuff we can do with JavaScript. Till then, thanks for watching everyone, and see you next time.